All right, what's up, guys? Welcome back to the C. Bailey Hub Podcast Network. It's been a bit since I've put out a podcast, but I'm back today and I'm back with a different topic. Today, we're going to be talking music, specifically classic rock, which is I guess, a style or genre of music that I really got my start in. My dad really got me going on a lot of these bands coming up. And these songs are just like old friends. A lot of these songs, they're songs that I love. They're songs that when I was learning how to play guitar coming up, that I learned how to play. I've played these songs from a lot of these bands at shows and open mics over the years, and it's a lot of fun. Now that being said, uh, this tier list that I'm going to create today, let me pull it up for you here. Here we go. This tier list is a pretty massive list. There are 103 bands on this list. Doing the research for this podcast took me quite a few hours, but it wasn't arduous work. It was a lot of fun. I love researching this kind of stuff. I love talking about music. So really quickly, just to run over the different tiers today, we have the rare air tier. That is the out of this world. Very few bands will be in this list. And right below that is the legendary tier. Now, the legendary tier is, you know, it's quite an honor to be in that tier as well, but not quite. You're not quite all time. You're not quite the cream of the crop, the best of the best. But still, you know, uh, legendary. And then we have great, good, mediocre, not for me. And that category I put in there because when I first discovered this tier list maker, they had I think it was either bad or poor tier. And while I was doing my research, I realized what a subjective process this is. And, everybody has different opinions. Everybody loves different bands. And I'm not going to say that any of the bands on this list today are bad by any means. I've played a lot of shows over the year and I've seen truly bad bands. And none of the bands on this list are bad bands by any means. But they might not be for me. This is my list, again, my opinion. If I put a band somewhere you don't agree with, please let me know in the comments. Let's have a respectful back and forth about it. I love talking music. And then there is does not belong on this list. There are a few groups on here who I feel just don't quite fit in with the rest. They may be from a different era, an era just past that true classic rock era. I'm really thinking of some of the kind of the 80s hair metal bands that make their appearance on this list. And that's not to say I don't like those bands. I actually really love 80s hair metal. It is a guilty pleasure of mine, so to speak. But so bands like that are going to go in there along with maybe a few others. But for the most part, you will find them all within the various tiers. So that being said, let's get this thing going. Let's try to get through these 103 bands. All right. So first up, we have 38 Special, a band I discovered on Guitar Hero back in the day. Their tune "Hold On Loosely, excuse me, not Lucy." Um, and they are a bit of a Leonard Skinner. I don't want to say shoot off, but there's a Leonard Skinner connection there with Donnie Van Zant being in that band. And I'm going to say 38 Special was a good band. They were just a good, hardworking uh, rock band. They had some Southern rock influence, not quite as much as bands like Skinner or the Allman Brothers, who we're going to talk about soon, but just a good band overall. Solid. All right. Next up, we have AC/DC, the Australian hard rock group. Certainly an iconic band. You can find AC/DC's music just about anywhere nowadays. I mean, you hear it at sports games, you see it in commercials, obviously all over classic rock radio. Angus Young is an iconic guitarist. I don't know if he's really one of the best guitarists, but he had a distinct style, and so did the band overall. Um, some people might put them in the legendary category. I'm going to put them just in the great category. I think AC/DC was a great band. Um, the only thing that kind of holds them back for me, and I've always said, once you've heard one AC/DC song, you've kind of heard them all. And yeah, that's really about it. All right, next up, we have Aerosmith. Now, Aerosmith is a group who I feel as time wore on, they definitely leaned a little more pop, but their early stuff, specifically the Toys in the Attic album, tunes like Dream On, Sweet Emotion, Walk This Way, all iconic. Joe Perry definitely played some legendary guitar riffs and riffs that I learned when I was coming up. I think that Aerosmith deserves the credit they get. Like I said, when you kind of get towards the later 80s, well, actually, they did their collaboration with Run DMC, which was cool, but that was a rehash of Walk This Way. But I'm thinking more of like songs they did for the Armageddon soundtrack and, just kind of more poppy stuff. I could take it or leave it. But I think Aerosmith is a great band. I really do. All right. Next up, we have Alice Cooper. Now, Alice Cooper is never somebody that I've personally gravitated towards. I think that he's pretty unique in that he was a pioneer kind of in the, I guess you could call it shock rock um, genre. He had a lot of macabre theatrics in his stage shows, definitely dark stuff. I always really liked his song I'm 18. Obviously, School's Out is an iconic tune of his. But for me, I can't really put Alice Cooper much above the good artists on this list. I don't think he's legendary or great. But again, somebody might disagree with me. All right. Next up, we're going to have our first entry in my legendary tier, and that is the Allman Brothers Band. I think that the Allman Brothers are really the gold standard for the Southern rock genre. Duane Allman, Dickie Betts, what they were able to do on the guitar, truly, truly legendary. And like I said, I don't think anybody really does it or did it better than them. So the Allman Brothers are going to be the first legendary group on the list. All right. Next up, we have a band that is near and dear to my heart. This is one of my dad's favorite bands. And you know what? I'm going to say one of my favorite bands too, and that's America. Definitely a bit of a lighter sound than some of the groups we've looked at so far, but as far as kind of folk rock goes, they are a really great group. When I was coming up, I've got my acoustic guitar behind me. When I was coming up learning acoustic guitar, their songs were really accessible. Really clever songwriters, really catchy melodies and harmonies. Uh, tunes like Sister Golden Hair, Ventura Highway, Horse with No Name, Lonely People, which is one of my all-time favorite songs. For me, I'm going to say that America is a great band. I think my dad would probably bump them up into the legendary tier. Sorry, Dad. Don't tear me apart too much, but America was a great band. No doubt about it. All right, next up, we have the Beach Boys. Oh, man. Now, the Beach Boys, I think, are really in a category of their own. Now, there have been other surf rock groups over the years, and they certainly weren't the pioneers of surf rock. I think that the Beach Boys popularized it, but they also went outside of that, and they were very revolutionary in the studio. I think of specifically the Pet Sounds record, which is I think a lot of music aficionados would have it as maybe a top 10 record of all time. It is certainly a feat of recording that has not been matched since. And just their ability to harmonize is second to none. Brian Wilson, really a genius as a songwriter, in spite of some of his struggles with mental health over the years. The Beach Boys are iconic. They certainly influenced their contemporaries. I know they influenced the Beatles, who we're going to see next. And for me, the Beach Boys are going to go up into that rare air category. I don't think there, will ever be another Beach Boys. There have certainly been a lot of surf rock groups, a lot of groups that I've enjoyed since, but a lot of them owe it to them. So the Beach Boys go up in the rare air category for me, along with this next band on the list, and that is the Beatles. I could do an entire podcast on the Beatles. You can see some of their records behind me. The one above my guitar, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, some may consider to be the greatest album ever recorded. Certainly one of the most ambitious undertakings in the studio. This is the record that they made after they decided to stop touring and just really focus in on what they were doing in the studio, pioneering just so many different ways to get different sounds, different recording techniques. And in terms of just impact on pop culture and the world, the Beatles are still loved and will always be loved. Like I said, I could go on and on about them. I don't want to take too much time. I think they're the greatest band to ever exist. To have done so much in basically a 10-year span, and for their sound to start with, kind of their roots with some of the 50s, uh, Buddy Holly, doo-wop, um, and then as they progressed and grew, you can see a record like Rubber Soul where they were influenced by artists like Bob Dylan, and to continue to just grow and to produce so many different styles and sounds. And I mean, the members individually are iconic. George Harrison is my favorite guitarist of all time. He's not the best guitarist of all time, but I just admire George Harrison as a person. I admire Paul McCartney as a songwriter, certainly John Lennon as well. And to me, the Beatles will always be a number one in that rare air category. They're just my favorite. All right. Next up, we have a bit anticlimactic here, but we have Billy Idol. He's kind of just a pop. He kind of put out a like a punk look, kind of a punk hard rock look, but he had some pop tunes: White Wedding, Rebel Yell, Money Money. I don't know. Billy Idol doesn't really do much for me. He was funny in The Wedding Singer. I'm not gonna say he's not for me. His stuff's catchy, but I think Billy Idol's pretty mediocre. All right, next up, we have Billy Joel. Billy Joel, certainly a beloved artist by many. I don't want to say he's overrated, because he certainly wrote his fair share of legendary tunes: Piano Man, We Didn't Start the Fire, Uptown Girl, Just the Way You Are. Some really, really great songs, some really catchy songs. Only the Good Die Young, which I think is one of possibly the catchiest melodies ever written. But people, and music fans tend to do this. People who rave about him and swear up and down you have to see him live. And to me, Billy Joel is a great artist. But I don't think he's anything more than that. If you want to argue about it, again, you know where to take that. All right, next up, we have Blondie. Blondie, Debbie Harry's group. They came out of the New York scene. They played at the legendary CBGB Rock Club along with groups like the Ramones and Iggy Pop. Their biggest hit, One Way or Another. But they also explored other songs, not other songs, other styles. They did some, like I said, punk rock stuff. They did some alternative stuff. They explored some island tunes, maybe a little bit of progressive stuff. The Tide is High, tunes like Heart of Glass. I think Debbie Harry, in terms of female front, I guess, women, you would say, it was iconic. To me, the music of the band, I don't know, there's not enough of a sample size for me to put them much above a good group. So that's where they're going for me. All right, next up, we have Bob Seger. There are no frills with Bob Seger. And when I was doing my research, I was actually surprised at how many hits he had. When I think Bob Seger, I think old time rock and roll. I love that. I've loved that song since I was a kid. It's a really fun song. But other tunes like a Rock, Night Moves, Against the Wind. So he had quite a few hits. But like I said, just kind of a good old blue collar rock and roll tune. Nothing fancy, or rock and roll tunes, I should say. Nothing fancy. So for me, Bob Seger is just a good artist. Not much more. All right. Now we have Blue Oyster Cult. Now the first thing that comes to mind when I think of Blue Oyster Cult is the classic SNL skit with Will Ferrell and the More Cowbell. And obviously they are playing their classic, probably their biggest hit, Don't Fear the Reaper, which is another Guitar Hero tune, a tune I encountered on there. They have another tune called Burning for You, which is a little lesser known, but I like that one a lot. And the group Shiny Toy Guns did kind of an electronic dance version of that was really fun. And then they got a little heavier with tunes like Godzilla as well. Blue Oyster Cult, kind of very standard for the time they were out. Just a good group, another good group. I enjoy them. All right, next up, we have Bon Jovi. Now, like I said, there are a few groups that I think come a little later on than these artists that we've talked about so far. And Bon Jovi is one of those. Now, I really like Bon Jovi. Obviously, some massive hits. You Give Love a Bad Name, Living on a Prayer, or, Cowboy, Steel Horse I Ride, Wanted Dead or Alive. It took me a minute there. And but I just don't really think that Bon Jovi belongs with these groups. I would talk about them if I were to do a podcast on groups of the 80s, maybe, hair metal bands of the 80s. They weren't quite metal, they were kind of in the pop, but great group. Just I don't really feel they fit in here. Okay, next up we have Boston. Another hardworking, no frills rock group. I came to know Boston early on in high school. Another group when I started playing guitar. More Than a Feeling, that classic 12-string part. I learned it on a 6-string, but that little riff on D there was one of the first guitar parts I learned, and not very hard to play, but certainly impressive when you get around other people, and it's an iconic tune. Other songs they had, Amanda, Smoking. To me, Boston is just a good band, just a good kind of standard classic rock band. All right, next up we have David Bowie. Now, David Bowie for me is a bit difficult to place because David Bowie certainly iconic. And his music, his record Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust. That's an iconic album. Tunes like Under Pressure, Space Oddity. Man, I can't speak right now. Space Oddity. Excuse me. Rebel Rebel, Heroes. Certainly iconic tunes, but I think that David Bowie is more known for his impact on pop culture, his fashion, his look. He certainly pioneered that androgynous look that was prevalent in rock and roll music for a long time. And he also made his way into movies, acting. David Bowie was an icon and a legend. For me, I'm not personally a huge follower of his music. I've enjoyed it some, but I can't put him anything lower than legendary. David Bowie is a legendary artist. All right, next up, we have Bachman Turner Overdrive. You ain't seen nothing yet. But other great tunes they had, Taking Care of Business. My favorite song from Bachman Turner Overdrive, Let It Ride. Just a good rock band. Again, another good rock band. All right. We have next we have Buffalo Springfield. Not a group I was super familiar with when I started researching. I didn't know that Neil Young and Stephen Stills were in this group. Obviously, they went on to become iconic in their own rights. But for me, Buffalo Springfield, when I listened to their tunes, they kind of just seemed like a mediocre run-of-the-mill 60s rock group. Obviously, those guys would go on to do legendary things, but for me, Buffalo Springfield didn't do all that much, so they were kind of just mediocre. Same with the next group, the Byrds. Now, oops, I think that the Byrds, again, Roger McGuinn, David Crosby, who would go on to collaborate with Stephen Stills. They had hits with Turn, 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 8 Miles High, cover of Bob Dylan's Mr. Tambourine Man. But again, just kind of that dime a dozen 60s rock sound that doesn't really stand out to me. I think some people might take offense to that, but there were so many other groups who were doing that sound and style at the time that it doesn't doesn't do much for me. Unlike the next band, who I think gets slightly underrated, and that is the Cars. Um, Rick Ocasek's group. It's certainly a unique band. They had a unique sound. Rick Ocasek has a unique voice, and he also went on to produce a lot of other bands. One of my favorite bands that would come many years later, at least one of my favorite bands in college, in the emo alternative scene, Motion City Soundtrack, was actually produced by Rick Ocasek. Um, but I love the Cars. I think that their songs are just really fun. I associate it with summer. Uh, Tune Magic, Best Friends Girl, Just What I Needed. Just really great songs. And for me, the Cars are a great band. Rest in peace, Rick Ocasek. All right. We have Creedence Clearwater Revival next. This may be the first, I believe it is the first of the artists on this list that I have seen live. I saw John Fogerty live. Um, and they're kind of just your down home roots rock band. Wrote a lot of great hits. Ever Seen the Rain? They wrote Proud Mary, which Tina Turner went on to make famous. Up Around the Bend, Fortunate Son. To me, Creedence is a great band. Their song. I remember first hearing Up Around the Bend. Remember the Titans growing up, and that was one of those gotta know who does this song moments. So Creedence was a great band. I'm glad that John Fogerty recently got back the rights to his songs. I hate when that happens to artists. So there we go. All right, next up we have Cheap Trick, another Guitar Hero band for me. You're going to see a few of these. I think Guitar Hero was great for a lot of us younger guys who didn't. I was born in 1989, and I learned a lot about this through my dad. But there are songs that slip through the cracks, and Guitar Hero did a good job of exposing some of the younger generation to tunes like "Surrender," which is a tune I never would have heard. Um, but they had other songs, "The Flame," "Want You to Want Me." To me, Cheap Trick is just a good rock band. Just another one on the good list. Good band, good tunes, cool guitar parts. Yeah. All right. Next up we have Chicago, and I want to shout out my best buddy Christian Sells for this one. I was aware of Chicago before I met Christian, which was freshman year of college. Christian and I lived on the same floor, and became really like brothers. And this was a band that he enjoyed a lot. Christian is a French horn player, and Chicago employs a lot of horns in their music, and they're really unique in that way. And I think Chicago is a cool group and a unique group because they can, really ramp it up and rock on tunes like Old Days and 25 or 624. And then they can dial it way back and do, softer, really pretty stuff. Like If You Leave Me Now, Hard to Say I'm Sorry, Inspiration. They really have a lot of range. And, they're one of the groups that, when you hear them, again, there are many groups in here that could bleed together. When you hear them, it's definitely distinctly Chicago. It's Chicago. And to me, Chicago is a great band. Haven't listened to them in a while. Maybe I should go back to them. What's up, Christian? Hope you're doing good. All right. Next up, we have The Clash. Definitely influential in the kind of punk rock new wave scene. The tunes like Stay or Go, London Calling, Rock the Casbah. I'm probably leaving quite a few out, and that's another thing I wanted to say when I started this. I don't have any time with 103 bands to get into the deep cuts. Sorry. um, to me, the Clash, I understand their influence and how they impacted bands beyond them. But to me, they're just a good band. That's preference, really. Oops, not they're a good band. All right, next up we're gonna to my oh, I'm not flipping it. Sorry. Next up, we have Cream. Now, this is the first time we're going to encounter Eric Clapton on this list, not the only time. But Jack Bruce and Ginger Baker round out Cream. Ginger Baker is a legendary drummer. And obviously, we know, if you know classic rock, you know Eric Clapton. Just one of the most iconic guitarists of all time, a virtuoso, certainly. And did a lot to bring blues music to the mainstream. Now, Cream was a little different. They certainly did incorporate blues music into their repertoire, tunes like Crossroads, but they did a lot of experimental and psychedelic rock, tunes like White Room, Sunshine of Your Love. You know, they really had a lot of range, and they're one of the trios that exists on this list. And I've always admired trios, you know, a one guitar trio, because it takes an incredibly talented guitarist to be able to carry a band playing both rhythm and lead parts at the same time. And Clapton certainly did that and did it quite well. They didn't have as long of a run as they probably could have. I think if they could have gone further, if they didn't have the creative differences that they did, they probably could have done more. But to me, Cream is a legendary group. All right. Along with the next group, Crosby, Stills, and Nash. Legendary folk rock group. If you want to throw Neil Young in there with them as well, their music is still inspiring. You know, a lot of modern folk rock acts. To me, I've never gravitated towards them outside of just the easily accessible stuff, but I can't deny that they're legendary. Okay, along with the next group, the Grateful Dead. Now, I personally am not a Deadhead, but it's jumpy. But there are millions of them out there, and I understand why. They're completely unique. I would say they pioneered the live jam band kind of thing. There wouldn't be groups like Phish without the Grateful Dead. And when I was thinking about their songs, uh, I I actually thought of a story that I heard on a documentary about the 1986 Celtics. Bill Walton, who was on that team, was a big Grateful Dead fan, and he took a bunch of players to one of the shows when the Dead came to Boston once, and they cut to Danny Ainge, and Danny he's talking about Bill, and he says, Bill, I don't really get this Grateful Dead thing. You gotta tell me some songs that I can listen to so I can go with you guys. And he said, Bill looked at me and he said, and that's something to this effect, man, when you're a real Dead fan, it's all one song. And I think that's kind of true. It sounds silly, but I think that's kind of true. If you go to a Dead concert, and I've seen live footage, that jam band format allows it all to really just flow into one big thing, and it's, I think, more of an experience than it is individual songs. I certainly admire the musicianship there. It's it's held up. I mean, they're still touring to this day with John Mayer. So good on the Grateful Dead. Respect to all you Deadheads out there. Not necessarily my favorite thing, but rock on. All right. So next up, excuse me, we have Deep Purple. And for many fledgling guitar players, Smoke on the Water is probably one of the first guitar riffs they learn. And I'm not sure whether or not they play it correctly. But to me, Deep Purple, I mean, outside of that song, I know that a lot of guitar purists will say that they have their place, but to me, they don't do much for me. I'm gonna put Deep Purple in the no offense to Richie Blackmore, but I'm gonna put them in the mediocre category. They just don't do much for me. Okay, unlike the next group on the list, who I wish I could say more about, but they're unfortunately going to go into the do not belong on this list, and that is Def Leppard, an iconic 80s hair metal group. If I were to make a podcast about hair metal bands, if I were to rank them, they would be right at the top of my list. I think they're wildly talented, cool story, but unfortunately, they're just not quite there with the rest of the groups. Okay, next band on the list, we have the Doobie Brothers, who I believe are my dad's favorite group. Certainly a great group. And when I think about the Doobie Brothers, I kind of think of two different eras of the band, two different styles of the band. You have the Tom Johnston led stuff, tunes like China Grove, Long Train Running. Um, and then you have the Michael McDonald led stuff, which is more Keeps You Running, What a Fool Believes. Though, though they have other hits too, tunes like Black Water, Listen to the Music. Certainly a great group, very talented group of musicians. Um, like I said, they're my dad's favorite band. They have stood for the most part the test of time. I believe they are still touring. Um, to me, they're not one of my. I like them. I enjoy them. They're not one of my personal favorites. I can't put them in the legendary category, but to me, the Doobie Brothers are a great band. All right. Next up, we have the Doors. Now, I'm probably going to catch some flack for this, but I don't know why the Doors have just never done much for me. I've definitely dipped my toe in the world of psychedelic music, but there are bands that I think I would rather listen to other than the Doors. King Crimson and the Electric Prunes. Um, I just the Doors don't really do that much for me. I know that Jim Morrison is considered to be a legend. They've got that song Crawling King Snake that I think is pretty cool. That's kind of actually a more bluesy influenced song. And some would put them in the legendary category. I'm going to just put them in the good category. The Doors just don't do it for me. Rest in peace, Jim Morrison. All right. Now, next up, we have Bob Dylan. And when I first was looking at these little icons that were dragging up here, I couldn't tell who or what that was. I had to look really, really closely. And if you look really closely, you can see Bob Dylan on there. And I'm glad I did because I would have just completely ignored him on this list. And that would be a shame because Bob Dylan is an icon in the folk world. I love folk music. I play folk music. I listen to folk music. I've attended the Newport Folk Festival. And a lot of the modern folk artists, I'm thinking about people like Jim James, Andrew Bird, the late great John Prine, Kurt Weill, the tallest man on earth. So many artists have been influenced by Bob Dylan. And Bob Dylan also influenced his contemporaries. I mentioned that he spent time with the Beatles. Um, I'm not going to get into what he did with the Beatles for the sake of appropriateness on this channel, but um, yeah, to me, Bob Dylan goes in the rare air category. I think that he's completely unique. He is a wonderful storyteller. He's certainly undergone different phases of his career, and I think come back around to where he once started. And some will say they don't like his voice or that he's not that good at guitar. But to me, he embodies everything that, folk music is. Folk music is not, it's not fancy, it's not frilly. It tells a story. It has its roots in the roots of our country. And Bob Dylan is an essential artist. I wish Donovan were on this list too, because the two of them were kind of competitors, and I love his music a lot too. But to me, Bob Dylan is a rare air artist. All right. Next up, we have the Eagles, another one of my favorite groups, and a group that I think gets a lot of flack, and I really don't think they should. I think some people think the Eagles are kind of lame, and maybe that's because they had some country style hits, but I think even the country stuff that they did was very roots country. It's not the Florida Georgia line, cheesy pop country you hear. It was really, I think of a song like Peaceful Easy Feeling or Desperado. Um, Really, really great tunes, really well written tunes. And they also had a lot of range as a group. They could play tunes like that, but they could also really ramp it up and play some really cool guitar parts, like songs like Life in the Fast Lane, Victim of Love, Witchy Woman. Obviously, their staple hit Hotel California, which is psychedelic and Spanish inspired. And, I just think that the Eagles don't get enough credit, maybe by some. The lineup, Joe Walsh and Don Felder, two amazing guitarists. Joe Walsh is one of my favorite guitar players. We're going to see him again on this list with the James Gang. And then Don Henley, really a poet, and along with Glenn Frey, rest in peace. It was a super group. And then, you throw in songs like I Can't Tell You Why, sung by the great Timothy B. Schmidt. It was a solid bass player and played in other bands like Poco. To me, the Eagles are a legendary band. Definitely a legendary band. All right. Next up, we have Jeff Lynne's group, ELO. Kind of more of a progressive rock group. I love the tune Evil Woman, always have from them. Telephone Line's a great song. Don't Bring Me Down, Mr. Blue Sky. ELO's a band that I haven't spent a ton of time listening to. I've always enjoyed them. I know some will consider them to be a legendary band. I know Jeff Lynne was part of the Traveling Wilburys with George Harrison, Bob Dylan, Roy Orbison, Tom Petty. But to me, ELO, kind of just a good band. I could see why others would place them higher than this, but to me, they're just a good band. All right, next up. We have Elton John, another artist who has stood the test of time, another iconic artist, not only from his music, but his fashion. He certainly was a pioneer in other areas as well, just lifestyle, and has inspired many artists. He inspired many artists of his time and many artists since. Some of my favorite songs from Elton John, guess that's why they call it the blues. Rocket Man, Your Song, Benny and the Jets. To me, Elton John is a legend. I was not aware until I did some research that he's not as much of an original songwriter as I thought. He did not write all of his songs, but I think just in terms of an overall career, he has had a legendary career. Okay. Now, I mentioned this guy earlier, but next up we have Slow Hand, Eric Clapton, one of my favorite artists of all time, and certainly an important artist. Got his start in the 60s in England. Really, his roots were in blues. He's played in a lot of different bands over the years. I mentioned Cream, but Derek and the Dominoes. He was in Blind Faith. Steve Winwood certainly has had a great solo career on his own. Tunes like Cocaine, Layla, which was Derek and the Dominoes, but really that's his song. Wonderful Tonight, Change the World, Bad Love. Eric Clapton, well, he might not bowl you over with his guitar solos. He is a virtuoso, and I think has really done a lot to preserve the blues for a lot of artists that you see today. Artists like John Mayer and Derek Trucks and Gary Clark Jr. I don't think there would be artists like that without Eric Clapton. And, I remember coming up playing, learning to play guitar. And as I got better, the solos from the unplugged version of Layla, I was able to learn those. And that was like a huge thing for me. And I still, if I'm at like a campfire or something, I'll break those out if we're playing a tune in D minor, and it's still a bit of a flex for me. Eric Clapton is a legend and always will be. Along with the next group on this list, Fleetwood Mac. When I think of Fleetwood Mac, I specifically think of the Rumors album. Such an iconic album, just an album packed full of hits. Really a superstar lineup as a band. Not without their struggles, certainly. They talk about workplace relationships. And I think that through Fleetwood Mac's music, you were hearing a lot of workplace relationship drama, but it produced some great songs. Tunes like Dreams, Everywhere, Rhiannon, Gypsy, The Chain, Go Your Own Way, Landslide. Fleetwood Mac is a great group, an iconic group, and a legendary group. Okay. Now, next up is Pink Floyd, one of my personal favorite bands on this list. And another band that I don't want to say doesn't get enough credit because they certainly do, but I think they're a band that might be a bit misunderstood. I remember when I was coming up again, discovering a lot of these groups, reading about a lot of these groups, and just kind of discussing it with my friends. They got lumped in with like Led Zeppelin and groups of the time, and they really sound nothing like that. Pink Floyd, I don't want to say they pioneered their own sound because when I listen to them, I can definitely hear some Beatles at times and as well as other things, but they were just so much more experimental. What David Gilmour was able to do with the guitar, he is in my top 3 to 5 guitar players of all time. He just was able to take the guitar and make it sound like otherworldly beings, and certainly I remember the first time I heard Comfortably Numb and the guitar solos on that song. I could sit here, they're another band I could sit here really and talk all day about. Obviously Dark Side of the Moon is an iconic record. Wish You Were Here, The Wall. Shine On You Crazy Diamond is one of my favorite songs of all time. Really, that whole first side of Wish You Were Here, just kind of some of the spaced out jamming stuff they do on there, um, is really really cool. And to me, Pink Floyd is one of the few rare air groups on this list. I know a lot might put them in the legendary category, but to me, Pink Floyd is they're a notch above. All right. It's funny how this list goes. Next up, we have Foreigner, a group who I think gets confused for Journey sometimes. But they were another group that when I was doing my research had more hits than I, would initially give them credit for. And a lot of just great rock tunes that when you hear them, you sing along. And, certainly the, people in bar rooms and on bar stools have belted out for years. But tunes like Urgent and beautiful song like Waiting for a Girl Like You, Cold as Ice, Hot Blooded, Jukebox Hero, Know What Love Is. For me, I kind of had Foreigner between the good and great category, but I'm going to put them up there in the great category. I think Foreigner was a great band. I really do. So next up, I'm not going to spend much time on this group. Grand Funk Railroad, they're not for me. I just they don't do it for me. I know that some people really enjoy them. I am not one of those. Just not for me. Unlike the next group, who is a really cool group and a group that I kind of wish had a longer run, but it seems like these super groups, just with the talent and probably the egos don't last as long as they could, but that's Genesis. Peter Gabriel and Phil Collins coming together to really do a lot for the progressive rock world. And again, like I said, tunes like Confusion, that's all. I wish that they had a longer run. I wish that those two artists had pursued careers more along the lines of what Genesis was doing. I think that certainly Phil Collins went almost all pop at a certain point, but Genesis, an iconic band, really cool band. If you don't know them, definitely check them out. They're a legendary group. All right. George Thorogood and the Destroyers. Kind of just a gritty blues rock group. Bad to the Bone. It's really all I think of. That song kind of annoys me. So George Thorogood and the Destroyers are not for me. Next up, we have the Guess Who. Now, I was not super familiar with the Guess Who. They are a Canadian rock group out of the 60s. But when I looked up their songs, I was familiar with their songs. They did the tune "These Eyes," "These Eyes," "These Eyes," da, 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 da. And whenever I think of that song, I think of the movie Superbad, and the tune, not the tune, and the scene when Michael Cera gets shut in the room with the guys who are basically doing drugs, and he claims to. They think he's the brother of like Jimmy's brother or something, and they make him sing, and he sings that song, and it's just a really funny scene. Um, and then American Woman, which Lenny Kravitz went on to have a hit with. Um, I don't know a ton about the Guess Who, but I like both of those songs, so I'm gonna say that the Guess Who was a good band. Make a little extra room here. Scroll up. All right. Moving right along to Heart. Oh, no, sorry. Guns N' Roses. Guns N' Roses does not belong there. Doesn't mean that they don't deserve their flowers, no pun intended, but I just don't feel like they fit in with the rest of the bands here. Next, we have Heart, Ann and Nancy Wilson's group. Also, two women who were pioneers for the female front women of the world. Um, really great, really great guitar player. I actually got to see them at the Big E with my dad. I love Magic Man. I love Crazy on You. Really, two great songs. Barracuda, cool guitar part. Um, you know, they're iconic certainly. Um, for me, I can't put them much above the good bands. Yeah, I can't put them above the good bands I have on this list though. All right, next up we have one of my favorite artists of all time, uh, the space alien Jimi Hendrix. Was he even real? To me, Jimi Hendrix was and always will be the greatest guitar player of all time. That's a very subjective claim, but for the short amount of time that he was with us, just what he was able to do with the guitar, the music he was able to put out. Are You Experienced, Axis Bold as Love, Electric Ladyland, Band of Gypsies. I mean, those records, tunes like Hey Joe, I've covered with my good buddy Timmy Rona, who's a great guitarist. Purple Haze, Foxy Lady, Little Wing, Wind Cries Mary, Voodoo Child, Red House. That guitar part on Voodoo Child with the wah pedal and the he kind of, made the wah pedal sound like scratching on a DJ table. And, um, Hendrix was able to get so many sounds out of really limited equipment. Guitar players nowadays will have pedal boards that are the size of a house. And, Hendrix did it with a fuzz pedal and a wah pedal and a lot of feedback, and some studio tricks too. But, to me, Hendrix is an icon and the greatest to ever pick up a guitar, and certainly has influenced countless guitar players. Many have imitated, but none have done it quite as well or quite like Jimi Hendrix. So Jimi Hendrix is going in the rare air category, certainly. All right, next up we have the Hollies. Long Cool Woman in a Black Dress. That's a cool song. That's about really all I can say for them. Iron Maiden. Now, this was the first band on this list that I guess you could really put in the heavy metal category. And I know a lot of metalheads out there will really, you know, really vouch for them as being a legendary group. I just don't really care for them. It's not even that I really don't care for them. It's just not my thing. I know that they have their place, and I'm not saying they're not talented. They are talented, and they've certainly put out a lot of music over the years, but it's just really not for me. Um, but next, but the next guy on the list and that is Jackson Browne. And Jackson Browne, if you listen to his stuff, it's not the most technically, intricate crazy stuff, but he did a lot of just roots, folk, Americana, classic tunes that that I love. Tunes like "Doctor My Eyes," "Running on Empty," "The Pretender," "Loadouts," "Somebody's Baby," and I actually want to shout out my best friend Mike Ratucci. When we were 18, we were on a cruise and we had a few karaoke nights, and we sang "Somebody's Baby" one night. And Jackson Browne also collaborated with a lot of artists in the 70s. I know he did a lot with the Eagles, and he's written for a lot of other artists, and he's still playing. And to me, Jackson Browne is a great artist. All right, along with the next guy on the list, so the James Gang, which is Joe Walsh's group. They had one big hit with Funk 49, which he performed solo now. And when I think of the James Gang, I really do just think of Joe Walsh. And Joe Walsh is a great guitar player, a very versatile guitar player. Another great tune, Rocky Mountain Way. Life's Been Good. There wouldn't be the Eagles as we know it without Joe Walsh, but Joe Walsh has a cool story of his own. He's really overcome a lot of personal demons, and he'll share that on stage. And he to me, Joe Walsh is a great guitar player. His solo stuff is good. It's not anything that I would spend a crazy amount of time on, but good stuff. And a great artist. All right, the next artist on this list, someone considered to be legendary. She's just never really done it for me. That's Janis Joplin, and I think that Janis Joplin, obviously a member of that iconic 27 Club, right? All the artists who died too young at the age of 27. And I think she kind of just embodies the look, the image, the feel of the 60s. Like if you were to, look in a dictionary, a picture of like a flower child, you might get a picture of Janis Joplin. She was just kind of that free spirit, free love, anything goes, hippie of the 60s that, was iconic. But her music is, Me and Bobby McGee, Piece of My Heart, Ball and Chain. It's good. It's good. I can't really say much more than that. I think she came along at the right time and certainly matched up with the vibe of the time, but I don't know, whatever. And the next group too, Jethro Tull, a group who I really haven't spent a ton of time on. I know in the progressive rock world. Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped over one, or I reversed them here. Jefferson Airplane, cool band. I like Jefferson Airplane. And a band that started out as a psychedelic rock tune. Songs like White Rabbit, Somebody to Love, certainly staples in the psychedelic rock world, I guess you could say. But they underwent some lineup changes over the years and some style changes, and they were able to kind of weather that storm and change their sound with the times, and they morphed into Jefferson Starship, and just kind of a cool group overall. They're to me, Jefferson Airplane is a great band. All right, now we have Jethro Tull. Now this is a band that some people might consider to be legendary, like and I understand why they would be iconic. They definitely, any group, any progressive rock group with a flute is certainly unique, but they're just really not for me. I haven't spent a ton of time on Jethro Tull. I might catch some flack for that, but they're going down there. Not really for me. Joan Jett and the Blackhearts. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on Joan Jett and the Blackhearts, but they rock. Joan Jett rocks. Certainly, badass female front woman, and tunes like "I Love Rock and Roll," "Bad Reputation," "I Hate Myself for Loving You." Yeah, they rock. Do I think they're overly talented? No, but you know, just a good band. All right. Next up, we have Journey. Now, some might be sick of Journey. Certainly, you can't get away from "Don't Stop Believin'." That song, any wedding you go to, any party you attend, that song is, it is the Coca-Cola, it is the McDonald's, it is, whatever you want to call it of 80s rock. Um, but it came from the Escape album, which is a really great album. And, there are certainly other great tunes from Journey. And a tune that I think is underrated is Who's Crying Now. Has one of my favorite guitar solos on it. But certainly they have other, big hits: Faithfully, Wheel in the Sky, Open Arms, Any Way You Want It. Um, they were, for the time, for who they were, uh, Steve Perry, great voice, very unique voice. That it's, I don't know many people who can really sing his stuff. Certainly I can't think of the guy who's fronting the band now, but Journey was a great band. Okay. Another band that's going to go in the not for me category, very much along the same lines of Iron Maiden, and that is Judas Priest. I'm going to talk about Black Sabbath in a little bit, who actually do have some tunes that I enjoy in the heavy metal category. And I know Judas Priest kind of came up with them. I know kind of came up at the same time, but again, just not a group I would really go out of my way to listen to at all. Not a sound I really care for. So yeah, not for me. Kansas. Kansas is next on the list, and another entry in the Guitar Hero discoveries, Carry On My Wayward Son. Great guitar part on that one. Really nice songwriting on a tune like Dust in the Wind. Though I do again think of Will Ferrell and Old School singing that at Blues Funeral. To me, Kansas just a good classic rock band. Okay, now we have the Kinks, and the Kinks are a 60s rock group, and certainly they had some hits, but I think that what I admire most about the Kinks is just how raw their sound could be at times. And I think they influenced some of the garage rock acts that came after them. A lot of their guitar parts, it just sounds like they stuck a microphone right up against a cheap amp in a garage. Certainly, All Day and All Night. That part. When I heard that, I just was like, yeah, this is great. It's raw. It's just like you're sitting in your garage and you're just rocking. But they, songs like Lola, you really got me. The Kinks are just a good gritty rock band, 60s, cool sound. All right, next up is Kiss. Kiss is similar to Alice Cooper, might be better known for their look than their music, though they had some good songs. I Was Made for Loving You, Rock and Roll All Night, Detroit Rock City, Beth, which is actually a very pretty song, a song that when I first heard it and found out it was Kiss, I was kind of shocked because it's just a really sweet love song. Lick It Up. Kiss was iconic. That there's obviously, you can buy Kiss toys and dolls and collectibles and, all this kind of stuff. And Gene Simmons and all those guys. It's, again, it was more of the shock rock factor, the look, the face paint and the tongue and the armor and just all that stuff. And, but certainly you wouldn't have bands probably like War or Slipknot, some of the modern groups that do that kind of stuff on stage if you didn't have Kiss. So I think Kiss is I'm gonna put Kiss on the good bands list. They're a good band. I don't think they're overly talented as musicians. I think they're pretty run of the mill. They're not mediocre, but I think it's more of a look than a talent. All right. Not going to spend a ton of time on the next group. Marshall Tucker Band. They don't really do much for me, but they were good. So, you know, I can't say that they weren't talented musicians, but just not a group I've spent a ton of time on. Um, but the next guy on the list, John Mellencamp, I got to see live. I saw him at that John Fogerty concert, and he was great, and he's still great. You know, he we're going to talk about Bruce Springsteen in a little bit, and I think a lot of people, you know, people say that Bruce Springsteen kind of embodies the everyday working man, kind of tells that story. His sound is very, I guess, you know, American, and I feel the same way about John Mellencamp, and in some ways, I feel like John Mellencamp does that a little bit better. Um, you know, I obviously a song like, you know, Small Town. I mean, that really says it all. But you know, Pink Houses, Jack and Diane, hurts so good. He does that cover of Van Morrison's Wild Night, which is really fun. And I love John Mellencamp. You know, I've loved him for a long time now. I think he's really cool. He's got some more just folk, softer leaning stuff that's really good too. And to me, John Mellencamp is a great artist. I really do think he is. All right, next up, Metallica. I don't think Metallica belongs on this list. Certainly iconic, but I don't think they belong on the list. Along with Motley Crue, I do not think they belong on this list. Both groups certainly deserve some credit, but they just don't fit in with the rest here. And next up, we have Neil Young. And I just want to take a minute to shout out a good friend of mine, a mentor, my former guitar teacher, Mark Dubuque. When I was first learning how to play guitar, Mark taught me how to play Heart of Gold. He taught me how to play Old Man. He taught me how to play Needle and the Damage Done. And he turned me on to Neil Young. I did not know anything about Neil Young before that. And to me, Neil Young is a legendary artist and a unique artist. You know, one of those voices again on this list that when you hear him, there's nobody who sounds like him. And he can kind of sit back and do um, some more folk type stuff, and he can, you know, turn it up and really rock it, like, you know, tunes like Hey Hey My, Rockin' in the Free World, certainly. Um, and he continues to make music and play today. And I'm really glad that I came across Neil Young when I did. And I think that learning how to play his stuff early on when I was learning how to play guitar was really beneficial to me overall as a guitar player. But Neil Young is definitely a legend. Thank you, Mr. D. Appreciate it. All right, next up, Ozzy Osbourne. Now, I guess we're going to talk about Ozzy Osbourne, the solo artist. Though I really think of Black Sabbath when I think of Ozzy Osbourne, more so than I think of him on his own, though he was iconic on his own. Crazy Train is a tune that's everywhere. I know that when I've gone to Patriots games and other sporting events, can't get away from that song, and that certainly is an iconic guitar riff. But he's got some other good tunes. Mama, I'm Coming Home. No More Tears is kind of a cool song. I think Ozzy on his own really is again another kind of shock rock guy. He just was you know, pretty vulgar. You know, did wild things, biting the bat's head off, and you know that kind of stuff. So went for that shock factor. His solo music to me, just good, whatever. Um, okay, next up we have Peter Frampton. Um, Peter Frampton, a British artist. I have his Frampton Comes Alive album, which is an iconic live record, certainly an iconic album cover and case. And I think Peter Frampton is a really great songwriter. You know, Show Me the Way is a great song. Baby, I Love Your Way. That's really one of the most beautiful love songs ever written, in my opinion. Do You Feel Like We Do? You know, Peter Frampton is, and he did some cool stuff with the talk box too, which is I love when guys use the talk box. To me, Peter Frampton is a great artist. I really enjoy him. All right, next up we have the Police, Sting's group. Um, before he was, I get, well, he was still Sting, but before he was solo and on his own. I enjoy the Police. I think that they were unique. They were certainly combining a lot of different sounds, new wave, some post punk, some reggae, some pop. Roxanne, Don't Stand So Close to Me. When I listen to early Huey Lewis and the News, who's one of my favorite artists, I actually hear some Police in there. Um, Obviously, every little thing she does, every breath you take, Message in a Bottle, which is like a finger bender as a guitar player. The Police are iconic. Some might say they're legendary. I'm not really quite ready to do that, but the Police are a great band, certainly. Um, but the next group on this list, Queen, who I didn't really come to until quite a bit later in life. Really the past, I think, 5 years or so, Queen has really come on my radar. And, it's not anything unique. I think a lot of people saw the Bohemian Rhapsody movie, and I'd always enjoyed Queen's music. I actually always kind of associated it with sports games. You go to a hockey game, you're going to hear, "We Will Rock You," or "Another One Bites the Dust," or "We Are the Champions." Those are all definite like jock rock sports songs. But once I kind of got to know the band a little more, they're really not jock rock guys. Definitely not Freddie Mercury, who incorporated, was really into opera, and incorporated a lot of, really cool different sounds. And I don't think gets enough credit as a pianist. I mean, that guy could really play the piano. Um, but tunes like "Don't Stop Me Now," "Radio Gaga," "Love of My Life," "Want to Be Free," those are all really cool and fun songs. And "Fat Bottom Girls" just rocks. Brian May is, I don't want to say he's underrated as a guitar player, and I think definitely since the movie has come out, people have gotten turned on to him a little more. Played guitar with a penny, or whatever the British equivalent of that is, and was also a rocket scientist, really smart, space engineer, or something like that. Really smart guy, really talented guitar player, really talented band overall. And to me, Queen is a legendary group, definitely. All right, I keep having to push this up. There are so many groups on this list. All right, next up we have the Ramones. Kind of punk rock pioneers out of New York. That kind of just three chords, single strumming. Blitzkrieg Bop, Wanna Be Sedated, Sheena's a Punk Rocker, Rockaway Beach. Uh, that, I think it was they were a product of their time a little bit, though you still hear their music today. Um, I enjoy it. I don't think there's really all that much to it, but that's kind of punk rock in some ways. And they certainly inspired and influenced a lot of bands after them. The Ramones are a great band. They deserve to be up there. Um, all right. Moving on to REM. I don't feel that REM belongs on this list. Talented, cool. One of the better things about the late '80s, early '90s, but I just don't think that they belong on this list. All right, I want to give my mom a shout out on this next one. REO Speedwagon, good rock group. I love the High Infidelity record. I own that on vinyl. Keep on Loving You, Take It on the Run, Can't Fight This Feeling, Time for Me to Fly, all great songs. And just a good band. Just a good band, REO Speedwagon. All right. Next up, we have Simon and Garfunkel. Oh no, sorry, not Simon and Garfunkel. Who is this? I can't even see who that is. Well, oh, Rod Stewart. Wow, I didn't even see that when I made this list. Man, you can barely see that. I'm gonna put Rod Stewart on the good artist list. I did not research him, but I like Rod Stewart. I think he's a good artist. And before we get to Simon and Garfunkel, I'm sorry, I was skipping right over Rush. And Rush is a power trio of Neil Peart, Geddy Lee, and Alex Lifeson. all very talented musicians, I believe from Canada, I think, and definitely icons in the progressive rock, hard rock world. Neil Peart is, one of a handful, top five probably greatest drummers of all time. Um, I really like, songs like Limelight, Fly By Night, Tom Sawyer is iconic. And the movie I Love You Man, I think put a spotlight on them and kind of just their nerdy following of diehards, and the guys who go to shows with their buddies without their girlfriends and just spend the whole time kind of in this trance, singing the songs and just having a great time. And Rush is a very, very talented band, and again, another trio on this list, and that's not an easy thing to do. Some would have them in the legendary category, and I can see why. Um, but I consider Rush to be a great band. Not To me, they're not quite legendary. Unlike the next two guys on the list, Simon and Garfunkel, specifically Paul Simon, but just pioneers again in the folk rock world. Um, Again, it's too bad that they couldn't do more together. Though Paul Simon certainly went on to have a lot of success as a solo artist. But they're they're what they were able to accomplish together was legendary. You still hear the sound of silence in a lot of TV shows. I don't know why it makes its way into a lot of comedy shows, but it's a very kind of dark and serious song. Bridge Over Troubled Water is a beautiful song. Mrs. Robinson's really cool. America, I think, is my favorite song. Certainly, when I was in my 20s and I was just adventuring through life, that was one of my anthems. Scarborough Fair, I Am a Rock, just legendary tunes, wonderful tunes, and a wonderful band, or wonderful, I guess, duo. All right, next up is Black Sabbath. Now, I'm going to put Black Sabbath in the legendary category. Though heavy metal isn't necessarily my thing, I can't deny their impact and their influence on that. And, Tony, and I'm thinking of obviously Ozzy as a songwriter, but Tony Iommi as a guitar player really, really did a lot for that heavy metal world of guitar playing. And, he was one of, not the first, but really popularized drop tuning. Drop D tuning was considered to be pretty extreme then. I mean, now guys, tune their guitar down to a fart, drop, whatever, drop, and they have they play the gents and the a million string guitars, but none of that would be possible without Black Sabbath and just iconic guitar riffs, like War Pigs and Iron Man and Paranoid, just icons in the heavy metal world. And I thought it was kind of funny. I saw an interview with Ozzy and they were asking about his influences, and he listed the Beatles as one of his main influences, and I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Um, the Beatles may have dipped their toe into heavy music, but not much. I think they consider Helter Skelter to be one of their heavier songs, but Black Sabbath are certainly a legendary group. Um, and next up, now this I thought was kind of odd. They put Sammy Hagar as a solo artist, and not, at least to my knowledge, Van Halen is not on this list, which is weird. So let's just ignore Sammy Hagar and talk about Van Halen, who I consider to be an iconic hard rock group. Rest in peace, Eddie Van Halen. Certainly a unique and influential guitar player. Just what he was able to do with all the tapping riffs that he created, and just his style of playing. Obviously influenced so many other guitarists in that hard rock metal soloing field, and tunes that are just fun. Van Halen was just a fun group. They were a talented group, but they were also a fun group. And I didn't like that they put Sammy Hagar, because I feel like they had their better stuff and more of their hits with David Lee Roth. I know the guy might have kind of been a jerk, and people didn't, they might not have liked him as much, but I think they did their better stuff with him. Jump, Hot for Teacher, Eruption, Dance the Night Away, Running with the Devil, Panama. Um, all great songs. And to me, Van Halen, not really Sammy Hagar, but Van Halen is a great band. Okay. Next up, we have Santana, the group, and I guess we'll just say Carlos Santana, the artist. Um, you know, as of late, has been more known for pop collaborations with like Rob Thomas and others. Um, and some consider him to be a guitar virtuoso. I've never really considered him to be a guitar virtuoso. Some want to put him on the level of Hendrix and Clapton. I've certainly heard that said, and I always kind of bucket that. But like 60s Santana, the group, the Woodstock Santana, that performance was really cool. They blended so many different sounds, psychedelic, blues, Latin, fusion rock. They were a really talented group and a really cool group. And I kind of wish people would think of Carlos, and maybe some do think of Carlos Santana more for, like Black Magic Woman, Oi Como Va, Samba Pati, you know, songs like that really showcase the creativity and the talent that Carlos Santana does have. I mean, now, you see him like in infomercials for like guitar master courses and stuff. I don't put him on the level of guitar players like we've seen on this list, like Clapton or Hendrix or David Gilmour. Um, but Carlos Santana, good, just good. All right. Next up, we have the Scorpions. Sorry, not Sex Pistols. Scorpions. Uh, does not belong on the list. 80s metal, fun stuff, cool riffs, but they don't belong on this list. Sex Pistols, another punk group. They're just not really for me. I don't really want to spend a ton of time on the Sex Pistols. I know they're iconic. Um, I definitely do enjoy some punk music. A little bit of it goes a long way for me, but just not really for me. Um, Now we have Leonard Skinner. Uh, Certainly iconic. Um, I think I've heard Sweet Home Alabama as much as I want to hear it in life. I used to work at Cracker Barrel, and I think I heard that song once a shift. Um, Not to say it's not a fun song. Not to say they don't have great songs. I really, Simple Man. I think their songs are just over. You just get an overexposure to their stuff. Simple Man, Free Bird, Free Bird's just a running joke. But you know what? Honestly, actually, if I were to think about any of their songs, I do enjoy Free Bird as a song. It just is that it's kind of long, and people get drunk and yell for it at shows. But um, some would consider Leonard Skinner to be the gold standard for Southern rock. I don't think they're quite on the same level as a group like the Allman Brothers, who I mentioned earlier. And to me, for that reason, I'm going to put Leonard Skinner up with the great bands, but not quite legendary. I know that's controversial. And I'm going to do the same with the next guy on this list, and that is Bruce Springsteen. Now, Bruce Springsteen has had a long career. Definitely, a strong songwriter. He's got a cool band, the E Street Band. They blend a lot of different sounds. Um, and I don't think you'd have an artist like Dave Matthews without, who I'm not wild about, but certainly made his mark. I don't think you'd have an artist like Dave Matthews without Bruce Springsteen. And Bruce Springsteen certainly has some records and some songs that I like. Um, Rosalita is one of my favorite songs. That would probably, you might find it somewhere on my top 100 songs. A Hungry Heart, Glory Days, Born to Run, Born in the USA, Dancing in the Dark. I'm not a diehard Bruce Springsteen guy. I can appreciate him. I think he's a great artist, but I can't go much beyond that. So that is where I stand with Bruce. Okay, next up we have Steely Dan. Um, really, really talented, talented group. Walter Becker, Donald Fagen. I know Jeff Skunk Baxter played guitar for them. Um, they were a group who did a lot of cool things in the studio. Um, and you can just, when you listen to them, you can hear the thought and the time and just the intricacy in their music. Um, Now, I can appreciate that. I don't necessarily love Steely Dan. They're not a go-to on my, on playlists I create, or, when I'm on a road trip listening to music. Um, but certainly the Asia album is an iconic album. Songs like Reelin' in the Years, Ricky Don't Lose That Number, Peg, Dirty Work, Deacon Blues. I mean, a lot of iconic songs. Some might put them in the legendary category. For me, they're a great band. I don't know. And again, just my opinion. Okay, so we're, I think, getting near the end for getting there. Steppenwolf, Born to Be Wild. Mediocre. No more time than that on Steppenwolf. All right, now we have the Steve Miller Band, the Joker, um, which is an iconic song, a fun song. But other great tunes, Jet Airliner, I really love that song. Take the Money and Run, Space Cowboy. Uh, just a fun band, and dip their toe into a little more psychedelic music if you kind of listen to some of their lesser known tunes. I think the Steve Miller Band is a great band. Certainly, certainly great band, Steve Miller Band. All right, next up we have one of my favorite artists of all time. If Jimi Hendrix is 1A on the guitar list, Stevie Ray Vaughan is 1B. Man, just a guy who, just like Jimi Hendrix, died too young. Uh, just blazing talent on the guitar. Played the guitar as hard as he possibly could every time he went out. And you're something special when a guy like Eric Clapton says that he was afraid to go on stage after you. And I think that Stevie Ray Vaughan could play Clapton under the table, as well as a lot of the kind of the blues legends, and his band Double Trouble too. Another trio, again, strong backing band. Um, I do think his brother Jimmy Vaughn gets a little too much credit and is a little overrated and has ridden his coattails, but whatever. But Stevie Ray Vaughan, another guy that modern bluesmen like John Mayer list as a main influence, and certainly was an influence on me. And I love him. I love him. To me, Stevie Ray Vaughan, if I can get him up there, is certainly a legend. I can't quite put him in the rare air category because I think for me, his I love his original music: Pride and Joy, Cold Shot, Texas Flood, Tightrope, House is Rocking, Couldn't Stand the Weather. It's good, but it's very one dimensional in that it's that electric blues stuff. Guys like Hendrix spanned a lot of different genres and did a lot of different things, and certainly Stevie could even play some of Hendrix's stuff and take it to a next level. But I can't put Stevie in the rare air category, but he is a legendary artist. Let me see if I can zoom this out because we're starting to get, whoa, sorry about that. Starting to get I guess, oh, here we go. Oops, that's too far. All right, that might do it. Alrighty, there we go. That looks a little better. All right, we now have the Rolling Stones. They just put out a record, which has gotten not so great reviews. I'm gonna put the Rolling Stones in the legendary category, but it's funny because I could also put them down in the not for me category. I never really got it with the Rolling Stones, especially when people compare them to the Beatles. I just don't. I don't see the innovation. I don't see the spanning of genres. I don't see the, quite frankly, talent, songwriting talent, musicianship. It's just I've never seen it there. I mean, obviously, some of the I love "Gimme Shelter." That's a cool song. "Paint It Black." Um, I don't know. For me, the Stones, I never got it. I know they're legendary, and I put them there as more of an obligatory thing. Um, but like I said, if I really wanted to be a knob, I might put them down in the not for me category because I don't really listen to them that much. I know Mick Jagger is certainly charismatic as a front man. Uh, Keith Richards, a good guitarist, I guess, but not doesn't really. I don't hold him above many of the guitar players on this list. Um, if if any, I mean, certainly not the iconic ones that I've talked about. So yeah, I'll put them in the legendary category. They've stood the test of time. It's cool they're still making music. Maybe I just haven't given it enough of a chance, but I don't know. You're up there, Stones, but whatever. Okay, now we have Styx. Styx was kind of a cool band. Definitely a different sound, kind of a spacey, progressive sound, and but they could also, get a little more traditional. I love "Come Sail Away." That's a really, really cool song. Just a journey of a song. "Too Much Time on My Hands" is a song that I think in times when I've, um, you know, been betrayed by my idle time, that song has come into mind. Renegade, Mr. Roboto is funky. Um, and yeah, I think that Styx is a good band. All right. And same thing with the next band, Supertramp. Good band. Not gonna talk too much about them. Their songs don't really do a whole lot for me, but they're good. Give a Little Bit, which annoyingly got covered by the Goo Goo Dolls. I like Supertramp's version. Obviously, they wrote it. Goodbye Stranger, which I think of Goodbye Toby in The Office. Yeah, Supertramp, good band. All right. Next up, we have Ted Nugent. I don't know if he's known more for being a musician or a hunter at this point, but Ted Nugent had some cool tunes. Stranglehold has a cool guitar part in it. That's one that I like to, turn my amp up and just really crank on. He was a decent guitar player, kind of harder rock. Cat Scratch Fever, you'll hear that, from time to time. Um, I don't know though. I guess Ted Nugent's good. Um, the band. Okay, the band. Um, Legendary tune, "The Weight." Atlantic City is such an underrated tune. I love Atlantic City. Um, and I think Springsteen covered it too, but the band wrote it, and I think just a really good band. No pun intended. Yeah, yeah, they're going in the good category. All right. The Jay Giles band. Love Stinks. Yeah, yeah. I certainly felt that sometimes. Another good band. You know what? If Jay Giles is good, the band's great. All right, there we go. That's how you move that. The Knack, My Sharona, mediocre, whatever. Let's keep going here. Moody Blues, Nights in White Satin, Your Wildest Dreams. Just mediocre here for me with the Moody Blues. Didn't really do much for me. Okay, the Who. Oh wow. So we went from the Moody Blues to the Who. Um, the Who, obviously, Who's Next is and Tommy, both very iconic albums. Tommy is one of those concept records. The Who was not one of, I don't want to say the first band to ever do like that concept album type thing, but they explored definitely some different sounds on that. Um, Keith Moon, Roger Daltrey, Pete Townsend, iconic musicians. Pete Townsend had some success on his own too. Um, but tunes like "Who Are You," Baba O'Riley, I love. Pinball Wizard, My Generation, Behind Blue Eyes. The Who is obviously a legendary group, and I like them a lot. Next up, Thin Lizzy. The Boys Are Back in Town. That's a fun song. Um, but I don't really have much to say other than that. I think Thin Lizzy just kind of run of the mill. honestly, when I first heard The Boys Are Back in Town too, I thought it was Bachman Turner Overdrive, but it's Thin Lizzy. But yeah, just kind of mediocre to me. All right, next up, we have Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. One of my personal favorites on this list, and an artist that I am sad that I never got to see. First, Tom Petty, great folk rock Americana songwriter. Um, one of my favorite songs of all time. That's not one of his bigger hits, but it's just personally um, means a lot to me. Is "Time to Move On." Just a really great message in that song. But and along with "I Won't Back Down," which is one of his bigger hits, but "Refugee" is one of my favorite guitar riffs of all time. "Free Fallin'" is one of the first songs I learned on guitar. Uh, "American Girl," "Here Comes My Girl," "Into the Great Wide Open." Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers are a legendary band. Tom Petty is a legendary songwriter. Rest in peace, Tom. You are missed. Um, really great stuff. All right. Next up, we have Toto. Like another mini shout out to Christian. I knew of Toto before him. Hold the Line was a song I always really liked. I liked the guitar part, just a really rocking guitar part. Rosanna's a cool song. Africa is obviously probably their most iconic song. And to me, Toto's just a good rock band. All right. We have Wings now, Paul McCartney's group. Um, Band on the Run's cool, Live and Let Die, cool songs. Paul McCartney is a solo artist. He explored some different sounds and styles. Um, he did Ebony and Ivory with Stevie Wonder. But his solo stuff, along with Lennon's solo stuff too, just never really did it much for me. I can't say it was mediocre or anything. I think it was just good. I think Wings was just a good band. I wish George Harrison was here on as a solo artist because I would actually put him up as a legendary solo artist. I think he did the best solo stuff out of any of the Beatles. Um, All Things Must Pass is just an incredible record. But Wings is a good band. Yes is up next. Owner of a Lonely Heart. That's a cool song. Progressive rock band. I think Yes was a good band. So I'm not going to say much more about them. Going up there too. Frank Zappa. Now, some would consider Frank Zappa to be legendary, and I get why. Certainly, probably the most experimental artist on this list. And if that's your thing, I totally get it. For me, I've never really gone down the Zappa rabbit hole much. Um, but from what I've listened to, I can definitely appreciate it. Um, and I think Frank Zappa, for as just as unique and original and experimental as he was a great artist. Um, all right, we have the mighty Led Zeppelin up next. Now Zeppelin certainly is a legendary group. Some would have them in the rare air group, and Jimmy Page is regarded as one of the greatest guitar players of all time, and deservedly so. John Bonham, a great drummer. John Paul Jones, I think it's a little underrated. And Robert Plant, you could make a case for Robert Plant as the greatest rock vocalist of all time. Insane range. Um, that just a stretch of records, really 1 through 4. I think, if they had kept on that trajectory, I think it gets a little weaker after that. Their stuff isn't quite as good after that to me. And the only knock I have on Zeppelin 2 is that, some of their live stuff, and I think it's probably because of, just drug and alcohol consumption, and some of their live stuff, especially Jimmy Page, is a little sloppy. Um, but, an iconic band and a legendary band and a band I enjoy. And, that even though Stairway to Heaven is one of those. I love that Stairway to Heaven is that like don't play this in guitar. I was actually in a guitar shop today. Didn't hear it, but it's one of those don't play it in a guitar shop songs. But a lot of love and respect for Led Zeppelin. All right, ZZ Top is our second to last group, kind of a blues rock group. I think, also known for their look, but good, good guitar stuff, fun songs, Sharp Dressed Man, Give Me All Your Lovin', Tush, LaGrange. Um, for me, I think some people really love ZZ Top. I think they're a good band. ZZ Top's a good band, and the next artist too, Meatloaf. Meatloaf was a good artist. He was a very theatrical artist. I think that he conveyed a lot of emotion in his music. He could definitely rock heavy, in the same way, kind of like that Queen could. And he also incorporated. He had a great voice. He could and incorporated some opera elements in his music. Rest in peace, Meatloaf. Um, but yeah, I can't do much more than put him in the good category. So, all right, wow, I can't believe I did it. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. And like I said, this list is my list. It's just my opinion. I had a lot of fun doing this. I had a lot of fun researching this, and let me know what you think. Um, that was a that was tough. That was hard to do. 103 artists. Um, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for supporting my last few videos. Just the success they've had on YouTube. I never thought I would be in a position like this. So really just thank you all to you guys out there, friends, family, and everyone in the YouTube world who have made them a success. Thank you so much. Um, I hope to be checking back soon with either some more music or jumping back to the sports stuff. So until then, God bless and have a great weekend, guys.